somewhere deep in the heart of the desert, where the sun burns hot enough to crack stone, and the silence is so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. A creature has been walking this earth for millions of years, carrying civilizations on its back, crossing distances that would kill any other living thing, surviving on almost nothing, and asking for nothing in return. It has been called the ship of the desert, but that title barely scratches the surface of what this animal truly is. Today, you are about to witness something that will change the way you see this magnificent creature forever. A story of survival, of loyalty, of what happens when the most resilient animal on the planet, exhausted, alone, and on the very edge of collapse, knocks on the door of a man who has almost nothing. What unfolds next is not just emotional. It is a reminder of something ancient and sacred that exists between humans and animals, a bond forged in the harshest place on Earth, that has quietly held the world together for thousands of years in the vast, unforgiving silence of the desert, where the sun scorches the earth and the wind carries nothing but dust and forgotten prayers. Life has always found a way to reach across the divide between human and animal. This is not a story born in a laboratory or written in a textbook. This is a story that happened in the quiet margins of the world, where poverty and nature exist side by side, sharing the same cracked earth, the same scarce water, the same desperate hunger. And there is a village small, unremarkable to the outside world, sitting at the edge of a vast desert expanse somewhere in the arid heartlands, where camels still roam as they have for thousands of years. The people here are not wealthy. They wake before the sun, tend to what little they have, and ask for nothing more than enough. A man lives here. An older man, lean from years of modest meals, his hands mapped with the lines of hard work and harder seasons. He has a small mud brick home, a patched door, a thin mattress, and a fire that he keeps burning more for company than for warmth. And on a particular morning, when the sky was the color of pale amber, and the desert stretched outward like an endless exhale, something arrived at his door that he did not expect. A sound slow, heavy, uncertain, like knuckles against wood, but deeper. A pressure against the old wooden frame. He opened the door, and standing there, trembling at the threshold, was a camel. And not a healthy camel, not a well-fed, ceremonially decorated camel of a prosperous trader. This animal was gaunt, its ribs pressed visibly against a coat dulled by dust and dehydration. Its eyes, those enormous, ancient eyes that camels carry like dark lanterns, were sunken, rimmed with exhaustion. It had walked, perhaps for days, through open desert, alone, separated from any herd, any owner, any direction that offered relief. And somehow, by instinct or fate or the invisible thread that sometimes pulls the suffering toward the merciful, it had found this door, and the old man stood very still. In desert communities, camels are not just animals, they are history. They are the reason civilizations survived in places where nothing should survive. They carry the weight of entire cultures across sand that would swallow a lesser creature whole. To see one in such a broken state is not simply sad. It is like watching something sacred come undone, and he looked at the animal for a long moment. Then he looked back into his home, at the modest sack of grain, the small clay pot of water sitting near the fire, the limited and carefully rationed provisions that were meant to carry him through the week. Any reasonable calculation would have told him to turn away, to close the door. He had barely enough for himself, but the man did not calculate. He simply responded, the way people do when something in them is older and wiser than logic. And he brought water first. A large bowl, filled generously, set carefully before the animal on the dusty ground outside his door. The camel lowered its great head slowly, as though even that movement cost something. And then it drank. Long, deliberate, grateful pulls of water that seemed to travel through the animal's entire body, like the first rain after a drought. The man watched in silence. He did not rush it, he did not speak. He simply bore witness. And when the water was gone, he brought his grain. The grain he had measured and portioned, and laid it on the ground with steady hands. The camel ate, and as it ate, something remarkable began to happen. The trembling in its legs, that fine constant shiver of an exhausted creature on the edge of collapse, slowly began to ease. Its breathing, shallow and labored when it first arrived, began to deepen. It was as if the animal's body, having received the message that it was safe, allowed itself to begin the long exhale of relief. And for hours the man sat nearby, not
Camel
uttering,
blood cells
not
are
performing kindness
oval-shaped,
for anyone
allowing them to
else.
flow smoothly
Just
even when
present, a
dehydrated.
quiet, steady
This
presence
unique
beside a
adaptation
creature that had
prevents
been utterly
clumping,
alone in a
enabling
vast,
camels to
indifferent
survive in
landscape.
extreme arid
By
conditions.
afternoon, the camel was resting fully on the ground beside the house. Its legs tucked beneath it in the way that camels rest when they feel secure. Its breathing had become slow and even. Its eyes, though still tired, had lost the desperate glaze of survival panic. And what passed between them in those hours cannot be measured. It lives in the category of things that science observes but cannot fully explain. The way trust forms between species. The way suffering, when met with gentleness, releases something that looks almost like gratitude. The camel, over the following days, did not leave. It rested. It ate what the man could spare, and the man, going slightly hungrier himself, continued to provide. And neighbors came and looked. Some offered help, some offered only their surprise. Word traveled, as it always does in small desert communities, carried on the wind like fine sand. People brought what they could, some water, some fodder, small contributions that together became something meaningful. The community, like the man, responded with something quieter and more powerful than policy or protocol. They responded with care, and the camel recovered. Slowly, incrementally, the way real recovery always happens, not in dramatic leaps, but in the steady accumulation of small improvements. Its coat regained some sheen, its eyes brightened. It began to stand more steadily, to move with the quiet dignity that healthy camels carry as naturally as they carry riders across dunes. And in a world that often measures worth by wealth and relevance by visibility, this story insists on something different. It insists that a man with almost nothing can still give enough. That an animal lost in the desert can find safety at the door of someone who has every reason to turn away and every reason of the heart to stay. There is something the desert teaches those who live long enough within its reach. That survival is rarely a solitary act. The great misconception about arid lands is that they are places of pure isolation, where every creature fends entirely for itself, and connection is a luxury that the harsh arithmetic of scarcity cannot afford. But spend enough time watching the desert, truly watching it, and a different truth begins to emerge. Survival here is deeply relational. It is woven from small acts of recognition, the acknowledgement that another living thing is present, that it is struggling, and that something can be done. And the camel has understood this longer than any human civilization has existed to record it. As a species, Camelus dromedarius, the one-humped dromedary that populates the deserts of Arabia, North Africa, and South Asia, has walked alongside human beings for nearly 4,000 years. This is not a short acquaintance. This is a partnership forged in one of the most demanding environments on Earth, tested across millennia of drought, migration, war, trade, and survival. The camel did not simply serve humanity, it enabled it. Without the camel, the Great Silk Road would have been an ambition too punishing to sustain. Without the camel, entire populations of desert-dwelling peoples would have had no reliable means of carrying water, goods, or themselves across the brutal distances that separated one source of life from the next. And to understand what happened at that old man's door, it helps to understand what a camel truly is, not the cartoon image of a bad-tempered, spitting creature of comedy, but the genuine biological marvel that evolution spent millions of years perfecting for exactly the kind of landscape in which this story unfolded. A camel's hump is not, as the old myth insists, a reservoir of water. It is a store of fat, dense, concentrated energy that the animal metabolizes during periods of scarcity, allowing it to go without food for extended periods while its body slowly draws from that reserve. Water, however, is managed differently. and the camel's relationship with hydration is one of the most extraordinary adaptations in the animal kingdom. And a camel can lose up to 30% of its body weight in water, a level of dehydration that would be fatal for almost any other large mammal, and survive. Its blood cells are oval rather than circular, a unique characteristic among mammals that allows them to continue flowing smoothly even as the blood thickens with dehydration. When water finally becomes available, a camel can drink over 100 liters in a single session, rehydrating with a speed and efficiency that no human-engineered system has yet replicated. The animal that arrived at the old man's door, trembling and depleted, was a creature whose body had been doing everything within its remarkable biological power to stay alive. And still, it had reached its limit. And what depletes a camel, beyond the capacity of even its extraordinary physiology, is not simply lack of water. It is the combination of heat, distance, isolation, and the absence of the social structure that camels, like humans, depend upon for psychological as well as physical well-being. Camels are not solitary by nature. In the wild, they move in groups. They read each other's behavior for signals of danger, for the direction of water, for the subtle cues that herd life provides as a constant orientation system. A camel separated from its group does not simply lose companionship, it loses a fundamental architecture of survival. It loses the collective intelligence of the herd. And this is what makes the animal's arrival at a human door so significant. It was not random. Camels have coexisted with humans long enough that the scent of human settlement, the presence of human structures, the residual smell of food and water and fire, these are deeply encoded signals. They mean, at some level registered far below conscious thought, the possibility of relief. The camel did not arrive at that door by accident. It arrived because something ancient and learned in its biology recognized a potential source of safety in the human
Camel
world.
blood cells are
And then the
oval-shaped,
old
allowing
man,
them
for
to
his
flow
part,
smoothly
recognized
even when
something in return.
dehydrated. This unique
People who have grown up
adaptation
close
prevents
to
clumping,
animals,
enabling
not as
camels
distant
to
observers
survive in
but as
extreme
daily
arid
companions,
conditions.
neighbors, co-inhabitants of the same landscape, develop a literacy that is difficult to articulate but immediately apparent in how they behave. They read distress in the angle of an animal's head, in the quality of its breathing, in the particular stillness that is not rest but exhaustion. The old man did not need a veterinarian's training to understand what stood before him. He had spent a life in the desert. He knew suffering when it arrived at his threshold. And across the following days, as the camel continued its slow recovery beside the mud brick house, the man observed things that deepened his attention. He noticed the way the animal tracked his movements, not with the wariness of a wild creature near a stranger, but with something that resembled attentiveness, even recognition. When he moved toward it, it did not flinch. When he sat beside it in the long quiet of the afternoon, it would sometimes turn its great head slowly in his direction, regarding him with those deep, patient eyes that have always made camels seem as though they are thinking about something far larger than the immediate moment. And researchers who study human-animal bonding have documented what desert communities have always known intuitively, that the relationship between humans and camels carries a particular quality of mutual awareness. Camels demonstrate long memories. They recognize individual humans across years and distances. They respond differently to people who have treated them well versus those who have treated them poorly, with a consistency that suggests not merely conditioned
White,
response,
rich,
but
the
something
primary
closer to
nutrition
remembered
source for
relationship.
entire desert
The
families.
camel resting beside the old man's house was not simply tolerating proximity to a food source. It was, in the way that its species has always engaged with the human world, beginning to know him. And the village around them continued its daily rhythms. Women carried water vessels in the early morning light. Children moved in loose clusters, pausing to observe the camel with wide, curious eyes before being called back to chores. Old
Hold
men
still.
sitting in the
Let me
shade
see
of
your
walls
eyes.
exchanged the particular kind of
No
conversation that
cloudiness. The
desert
membrane
communities have
looks
always
clear.
traded: stories,
Good. No sign of
observations,
infection.
the careful accumulation of local knowledge about weather, animals, and the invisible patterns that govern life in a landscape that offers few margins for error. The presence of the recovering camel became part of the village's daily texture, folded into the ordinary life of a place that had long since made peace with the extraordinary, simply being another form of the everyday. And there were practical considerations that the community quietly organized around. Camels require significant quantities of food and water to maintain health. And a recovering camel, one whose body is actively working to rebuild depleted reserves, requires more than maintenance amounts. The old man's neighbors began to contribute with the unceremonious generosity common to communities where hardship is shared and unspoken. A bucket of water left by the door before dawn, a bundle of dried grass placed at the edge of the yard.
The camel's hump is now
Small
noticeably
offerings made
firmer
without
than in
ceremony.
earlier scenes,
That
a
collectively
visible sign of
constituted an
recovery
act of
and
communal
returning
care,
reserves.
extended not just to the animal, but to the man who had chosen to shelter it. And because that choice, the choice the old man had made on that amber morning when he opened his door and did not close it again, had not gone unnoticed. In communities built close to the bone of survival, generosity is not taken for granted. It is seen and it is remembered. The man had given from scarcity, which is a different and more
Whoa, it's
profound
so
act than
big.
giving from
Don't be
surplus.
scared. It's friendly.
He had looked at his
I
own
pet it?
insufficient provisions and decided
Wow,
that
it likes
insufficient
us.
was still
It's
enough
so
to share.
calm.
That decision rippled outward through the village in ways that were quiet but real. The way water moves through sand, invisibly, persistently, reaching further than the surface suggests. The desert has its own economy, one that operates on principles entirely different from the markets of cities and commerce. In this economy, the currency is not paper or metal, but knowledge, labor, trust, and the careful stewardship of living things. A healthy camel in a desert community is not merely an animal, it is infrastructure. It is transportation, milk, wool, and in the most desperate of times, sustenance. It is the difference between reaching the next well and not reaching it. Understanding this helps illuminate why the community's quiet investment in the recovering camel was not simply sentiment. It was, in the deepest practical sense, an investment in the collective capacity to survive. And camel farming, or camel husbandry, as it has been practiced across the Arabian Peninsula, the Horn of Africa, the Sahara, and the Thar Desert of South Asia for thousands of years, is one of the oldest and most sophisticated forms of animal agriculture on Earth. It is not farming in the industrial sense. It does not happen in enclosed lots with measured feed schedules and climate-controlled environments. It happens across open desert, in seasonal migration patterns that follow the availability of grazing, in a relationship between herder and animal that demands constant attention, deep patience, and an intimate knowledge of both the landscape and the creature. A camel
Thank
herder
you, my
does not
friend.
simply own camels, he reads them. He understands their moods, their physical signals, their preferences, and their fears. He knows which animals lead and which follow, which are reliable under load, and which become unpredictable in unfamiliar terrain. This knowledge is
White,
not written in
rich, the
manuals.
primary nutrition
It is
source
passed
for
from
entire desert
generation to
families.
generation in the living classroom of the desert itself. And the dromedary camel, fully grown, stands between 1.8 and 2 meters at the shoulder and weighs anywhere from 400 to 600 kilograms. It is an animal of considerable power, and yet what is most remarkable about it is not its strength but its efficiency. In terms of load carrying relative to energy consumption across difficult terrain, no vehicle
Hold
engineered
still.
by human
Let me see
hands
your
has
eyes.
ever matched a healthy camel
No
moving at its natural
cloudiness.
pace
The
across
membrane
sand.
looks clear.
The wide, padded
Good.
feet
No
two-toed,
sign of infection.
with a tough leathery sole and a spreading structure that distributes weight over a large surface area, allow the animal to move across soft sand without sinking, in the way that a snowshoe distributes a person's weight across snow. The gait of a camel, that distinctive swaying rhythm that gives riders the sensation of being on a slow ocean wave, is not clumsiness. It is a biomechanically optimized pattern of movement that minimizes energy expenditure over long distances. Every aspect of the camel's physical design is a solution to a specific problem posed by the desert environment. And its eyes are protected by 3 eyelids, 2 conventional lids, and a third translucent membrane that can be drawn across the eye during sandstorms, allowing the animal to continue moving through conditions that would force any other creature to stop and wait. Its nostrils can
The
close
camel's
almost
hump is now
entirely,
noticeably firmer than in
filtering out
earlier
the fine
scenes,
particulate
a
matter
visible
that
sign
desert
of
winds
recovery
carry in
and returning
quantities that
reserves.
can be dangerous to respiratory systems not built to handle them. The inside of a camel's mouth is so tough that it can consume thorny desert plants, including species that would lacerate the mouths of other grazing animals without apparent discomfort. Even the camel's coat, which appears to trap heat, actually functions as thermal insulation in both directions, keeping the animal cooler during the heat of the
Whoa,
day
it's so
by slowing
big.
the rate at which
Don't be
external
scared,
heat
it's friendly.
penetrates to the body
Can I
core.
pet it?
And the camel resting beside
Wow,
the
it
old
likes
man's
us.
house
It's so
carried all of
calm.
this ancient engineering within it. And as the days passed and its condition continued to improve, these systems began to reassert themselves one by one, the way a complex machine, given the right conditions, gradually returns to its designed function. Its coat began to regain its natural density and luster. Its posture, when standing, recovered the upright steadiness that healthy camels hold almost effortlessly. Its movements, once slow and careful in the manner of an animal conserving every calorie, began to take on a more natural ease. It began to graze on the dry vegetation at the edges of the yard, selecting with the deliberateness of a creature whose digestive system is designed to extract maximum nutrition from minimum material. And camels are ruminants like cattle, sheep, and goats. They have a multi-chambered digestive system that processes plant material through repeated cycles of digestion, allowing them to extract nutrients from fibrous desert vegetation that monogastric animals cannot efficiently metabolize. They are not, however, simple grazers. They are browsers and grazers both, capable of moving between ground-level vegetation and higher shrubs and trees, which expands their available food sources in environments where no single type of vegetation grows in reliable abundance. In the Thar Desert, where this kind of story has played out in countless variations across human history, camels are known to consume over 70 species of plants, navigating a complex and shifting botanical landscape with a selectivity that reflects genuine nutritional intelligence rather than indiscriminate consumption. And the milk that camels produce is, in many desert communities, the primary source of protein and nutrients for entire families, particularly during dry seasons when other food sources become unreliable. Camel milk is nutritionally distinct from the milk of other domesticated animals. It is lower in fat, higher in vitamin C, and contains proteins with antimicrobial properties that give it a naturally longer shelf life in warm environments, a characteristic of obvious value in places where refrigeration does not exist. For nomadic desert communities, a lactating camel is not simply a food source. She is a pharmacy, a grocery, and a lifeline woven into the daily survival equation of the family that tends her. There are communities across the Sahara and the Arabian Desert where children have been raised almost entirely on camel milk during seasons of scarcity, where the animal's productivity has stood between a family and starvation, with a quiet reliability that no aid package could replicate in the short term. And the old man understood all of this in the way that people understand things they have grown up knowing, not as assembled facts, but as lived truth, embedded in the texture of daily life. He had seen camels work. He had seen them carry loads across distances that exhausted men. He had drunk camel milk in hard seasons. He had watched experienced herders manage their animals across the desert, with the kind of calm authority that comes from years of mutual familiarity. Camels, in his world, were not background figures. They were protagonists of survival, central, irreplaceable characters in the story of how human life persisted in places where it had no reasonable right to. And as the recovering camel grew stronger, something in its behavior toward the man deepened noticeably. See, it had begun in the way that camels do when they become comfortable with a particular human. To make sounds in his presence low, resonant vocalizations that carry no urgency but seem to function as acknowledgement. As greeting, as the animal equivalent of a nod between neighbors. It would turn toward the sound of his footsteps before he came into view. It allowed him to run his hand along its neck and flank without any of the tension that camels show when touched by strangers, a tension visible in the ears, in the set of the jaw, in the faint but readable stiffening of the body that communicates unease. And experienced camel handlers know that earning an animal's genuine comfort is not a matter of days. It is a process built through consistency and patience, and the absence of any behavior that the animal registers as threatening or unpredictable. The fact that this camel, arriving in a state of extreme vulnerability, had moved so quickly toward trust spoke to something in the man's manner, a quality of stillness. Perhaps a natural ease around large animals that comes from a life lived in proximity to them. A way of moving and speaking, and simply being that communicated safety without effort or performance. And there is a concept known in some desert cultures as the bond between a camel and its keeper, a bond considered so significant that in traditional communities, the transfer of a valued camel from one owner to another was treated with the seriousness of a legal and social contract. A camel that had bonded deeply with a particular person was understood to be diminished, sometimes visibly, measurably diminished in health and productivity when separated from that person. This was not mysticism. It was observation, accumulated across generations of watching animals, whose emotional states expressed themselves in physical symptoms with a directness that left little room for misinterpretation. A camel grieving a lost companion, human or animal, eats less, moves less, produces less milk, and in documented cases, has been known to refuse food entirely. And what was forming beside that mud brick house, in the dry air and the long desert light, was precisely this kind of bond, quiet, unhurried, built in the shared language of proximity and care, rather than in any dramatic moment of rescue or declaration, across the ancient world. From the sun-bleached markets of Marrakesh to the windswept plateaus of the Gobi, from the salt flats of the Ran of Kutch to the vast red emptiness of the Rub, Al-Khali, the empty quarter, the camel has occupied a place in human culture that transcends utility. It has
Camel
entered
blood
language,
cells are
poetry,
oval-shaped,
religion,
allowing
and
them
law.
to flow smoothly
It
even
has
when
shaped
dehydrated.
architecture,
This
determined
unique
trade routes,
adaptation
and
prevents
influenced the
clumping,
rise and
enabling
fall of
camels to
entire
survive in
civilizations.
extreme arid
The
conditions.
Arabic language alone contains over 100 distinct words for the camel in its various states, ages, conditions, and roles, a linguistic richness that reflects the depth of attention a culture pays to something it considers indispensable. A language does not build that kind of vocabulary around something peripheral. It builds it around something central to survival, identity, and meaning. And in the Quran, the camel is referenced as a sign of divine creation, an example held up for human contemplation of the Creator's wisdom and design. In Bedouin poetry, the camel appears as a companion of the road, a witness to loneliness and endurance, a creature whose patience under burden mirrors the patience that desert life demands of the people who live it. In the oral traditions of the Tuareg people of the Sahara, camels feature in stories of navigation, loyalty, and the particular kind of courage that is not dramatic but persistent, the courage of continuing to move forward when the horizon offers nothing certain. These are not decorative cultural references. They are evidence of a relationship so long and so deep that it has shaped the inner life of entire peoples, not just their material circumstances. And the village where the old man lived carried its own version of this inheritance. Though small and largely invisible to the wider world, it possessed the accumulated wisdom of generations who had learned, through direct and often harsh experience, how to read the desert, how to manage animals within it,
White,
and how to
rich,
maintain
the
the
primary
delicate
nutrition
social fabric
source for
that
entire
allowed
desert
communities to
families.
survive in conditions of scarcity. The elders of such villages are libraries, living repositories of knowledge about weather patterns, grazing routes, animal behavior, traditional medicine, and the seasonal rhythms of a landscape that presents itself differently in each month of the year. Their knowledge is empirical in the truest sense, gathered through observation, tested through experience, refined through generations of correction and
Hold still.
adaptation.
Let me see your
And among
eyes.
the things such elders know with particular
No
clarity
cloudiness.
is how
The
to care for
membrane
a
looks
sick or
clear.
depleted camel.
Good. No sign
Traditional
of
camel
infection.
medicine, practiced across desert communities long before any veterinary institution existed to formalize it, is a sophisticated body of knowledge built on centuries of direct observation. Desert healers knew which plants had anti-inflammatory properties, which could reduce fever, which stimulated appetite in an animal that had stopped eating. They knew how to recognize the early signs of trypanosomiasis, a parasitic disease carried by biting flies that has devastated camel populations throughout history, and how to distinguish it from simple dehydration or exhaustion. They knew how to treat mange, how to splint a fractured leg, how to assist a difficult birth, and how to read the color of a camel's urine and the consistency of its dung as diagnostic indicators of internal health. This knowledge, much of it never written down,
The camel's hump is now noticeably firmer than in earlier scenes, a visible sign of recovery and returning reserves.
Several of the older men in the village came to observe the recovering camel with precisely this kind of informed attention. They examined its eyes for the cloudiness that signals certain infections. They checked the texture of its skin, pulling gently at the coat to assess hydration levels, a simple but reliable indicator used by herders for generations. Based on the speed with which the skin returns to its normal position after being lightly pinched,
Big. Don't be
they
scared,
looked at the
it's
hump,
friendly. Can I
whose
pet
firmness or softness communicates
Wow,
the
it
state of
likes
the
us.
animal's fat
So
reserves
calm.
with immediate clarity. A firm, upright hump indicates adequate reserves. A soft, deflated, or leaning hump tells you that the animal has been drawing heavily on those reserves, which is exactly what they found, and exactly what the days of consistent feeding were beginning to correct. And their assessment was quietly encouraging. The camel had no signs of serious infection. Its depletion appeared to be the straightforward result of extended travel without sufficient food or water, a condition serious enough to have been fatal if unaddressed, but one from which a healthy animal, given proper care, could make a full recovery. They recommended continued feeding with a mixture of dried dates, grain, and whatever fresh vegetation could be gathered from the surrounding area. They suggested that the camel be encouraged to move short, gentle walks in the cooler hours of morning and evening to prevent the muscular stiffness that sets in when a depleted animal remains stationary for too long. They advised patience above all else. Recovery in a camel, they explained to the younger people gathered around, cannot be rushed. The animal's body has its own timeline, and attempting to accelerate it by demanding too much too soon will set the process back.
Thank you, my friend.
And the old man listened to all of this carefully and followed the guidance with the same quiet attentiveness that had characterized his care from the beginning. Each morning, before the heat of the day had fully established itself, he would walk slowly alongside the camel through the sparse vegetation at the village's edge. He did not lead it on a rope. He simply walked, and the animal walked beside him at its own pace, stopping when it wanted to investigate a plant, moving again when it was ready. There is a particular image that those who witnessed these morning walks describe: a thin, unhurried man and a slowly strengthening camel, moving together through the golden early light, neither leading nor following, but simply accompanying each other through a landscape that seemed, in those quiet hours, to hold its breath. And camel walking, in traditional desert practice, is itself a form of care. The animals are not built for prolonged stillness. Their circulation, their digestion, their musculoskeletal health, all are served by regular, moderate movement. Nomadic herders have always known that a camel kept moving at a sensible pace across reasonable distances is a healthier camel than one confined and sedentary. The great camel caravans of history, those legendary convoys of dozens or hundreds of animals that crossed
Camel
the
blood
Sahara
cells are
and the
oval-shaped,
Arabian
allowing them to
desert
flow
carrying
smoothly
salt,
even when dehydrated.
gold, spices,
This unique
silk,
adaptation prevents
and
clumping,
ideas from
enabling
one
camels to
civilization
survive in
another
extreme
were
arid
not
conditions.
simply economic enterprises. They were, among other things, an environment that kept the animals healthy through constant, purposeful movement across varied terrain. And these caravans were marvels of organizational complexity that have received far less historical attention than they deserve. At their height during the medieval period, trans-Saharan caravans could include thousands of camels, organized into disciplined columns with lead animals setting the pace, experienced herders managing specific sections, and a support structure of human knowledge about navigation, water sources, grazing locations, and safe stopping points that had been built up over centuries of collective experience. The men who guided these caravans were not simply drivers. They were navigators, veterinarians, meteorologists, and diplomats, reading the stars. The sand, the behavior of their animals, and the political landscape of the territories they crossed with equal fluency. The camel made all of this possible. Without the camel's capacity to carry substantial loads over extraordinary distances, without reliable access to water, the economic and cultural exchange that these caravans facilitated, exchange that shaped medieval civilization on 3 continents, simply could not have occurred. And the camel standing in that village yard, recovering beside a poor man's door, was the living descendant of the animals that had carried that history across the sand. Every biological adaptation it possessed, the oval blood cells, the closing nostrils, the padded feet, the extraordinary metabolic flexibility, had been shaped not only by natural selection, but by thousands of years of coevolution with human purpose and human care. Domesticated animals change in response to their relationship with humans, and humans change in response to their relationship with domesticated animals. The camel and the desert peoples who kept it had shaped each other across so many generations that separating the natural history of one from the cultural history of the other had become, in any meaningful sense, impossible. And this is perhaps what made the scene at that village, an impoverished man sharing his scarce provisions with a depleted animal, something more than a simple act of kindness. It was, in some larger sense, a reenactment of a relationship that stretched back to the very foundations of desert civilization. The first people who approached wild camels in the Arabian Peninsula, thousands of years ago, did so with a combination of need, observation, patience, and the willingness to offer something in exchange for the animal's trust. They offered water, food, and the safety of human proximity, and in return, the camel offered everything that would eventually make possible the desert civilizations, the trade routes, the migrations, and the cultural exchanges that shaped much of the ancient world. What happened at that door was, in its quiet way, that original exchange, repeated across the millennia, as essential and as human as it had ever been.